The contempt of Set the Nile Delta, 1156 BCE, the Ramesside period. A brutal, ceaseless sun blistered the earth above the muddy banks where the gods gathered. The very air was thick and sour with divine sweat and mortal desperation. For 80 years, the Ennead, the great council of the gods of Heliopolis, had been deadlocked. The throne of Osiris lay vacant, its fate paralyzed by the vicious and unending contendings between Set, the glorious red-haired god of storms, deserts, and utter chaos, and the young, insistent Horus, the avenging sun. Today's session was held at the edge of the Great Green, the Mediterranean, a neutral ground, or so they hoped. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of knowledge, furiously inscribed the day's events onto a lapis lazuli tablet, his beak clicking in annoyance. The great judge, Shu, god of the air, sighed a cloud of warm moisture that momentarily veiled the proceedings. Ra, the sun god, was too far above to intervene directly, having passed the ultimate judgment to the council, but the sheer, blinding intensity of his solar disk seemed to press down on the scene, demanding a resolution. Set, in a magnificent muscular form, stood at the center, a sardonic curl playing on his snout-like face. He radiated a dry, electric heat, and the sand beneath his feet seemed to shiver and crack. "This nonsense must conclude," he bellowed, his voice like the grinding of millstones. "The boy Horus is a wet nurse's pet, not a king. He demands my throne because of a bloodline. I demand it because I earned it, through superior strength and a willingness to act where others merely preach." Horus, handsome, fierce, and perpetually masked by the head of a falcon, stepped forward. He carried the weight of his father's murder and his mother's suffering in his eyes. "My claim is not mere blood," Horus said, his voice a steady, clear command. "My claim is Ma'at. Your rule, Set, is the triumph of Isfet, of disorder. You butchered the king and scattered his body. The throne of Egypt belongs to the one who brings balance, not the one who brings storms." The stalemate was tiresome, but the council could not dismiss Set. He was vital to the very functioning of the cosmos, defending Ra's bark from the serpent Apep every night. The solution Thoth offered was a challenge, a spectacle, the race of the divine vessels. "Let the goddess Isis construct a vessel for her son and set one for himself," Thoth declared. "The first to circumnavigate the Isle of the Two Truths and return will win this phase of the contendings." Isis, the great sorceress, the throne herself, stood apart, cloaked in midnight blue, her face a mask of sorrowful determination. She had already suffered the humiliation of being reduced to a mortal woman to conceive her son, and the ceaseless fear of Set's malice. Now she was expected to build a boat capable of outpacing the desert god's pure strength. Set merely threw back his head and roared with contemptuous laughter. "Isis, the queen of magic, will build a boat?" Set sneered, gesturing dramatically with a hand that trailed dust and fire. "She will weave one of papyrus and tears, no doubt. I shall simply construct a ship of pure granite from the quarries of Aswan. It will be a vessel of unyielding stone, a match for my unyielding will. Watch and weep, great mother, as your pathetic little dinghy is smashed to fragments by the might of the desert lord." Isis did not react to the mockery. She had already conceived a plot so audacious, so utterly unthinkable, it could only have been born from a mother's cold, terrible love. She turned her back on the gathering and walked slowly toward the muddy water, her mind not on wood or stone, but on the secret she held, the terrible, potent name she had clawed from the lips of the sun god himself. The vessel of the unspoken name Isis vanished into the shadow of a colossal sycamore, her form shimmering and reforming, no longer the majestic queen, but an old, wrinkled woman, a frail weaver, cloaked in poverty and dust. This was the disguise she had worn when she stalked the divine bark of Ra years ago, when she forced the great sun god, in his senility, to utter his true name, the secret word of ultimate power, the essence of creation itself. No one saw her now but a cluster of Nile geese, which honked dismissively at her presence. She did not seek out the cedar of Lebanon, nor the granite of the southern quarries, nor the durable acacia wood favored by the pharaohs. She sought only a small, humble patch of mud along the bank. With her age-trembling hands, she began to mold the bank's wet earth, shaping it into a tiny, laughably small vessel. It was hardly more than a coracle, an insignificant bowl that seemed incapable of holding even a mortal child, much less the glorious falcon god, Horus. The other gods, taking their ease until the race began, pointed and murmured at the absurdity. Set's laborers, a host of desert spirits and demons he commanded, were meanwhile toiling in a magnificent, grinding fury. Their work, miles upstream, sounded like an earthquake as they carved his mighty ship of pure black granite. This was a vessel of terrifying mass, a blunt, indestructible weapon designed to cleave the waves and crush anything in its path. Set wanted not only to win, but to thoroughly humiliate his foe. The granite ship, when it was finally towed to the starting line by the straining sons of Horus, was a testament to brute, divine strength. It was immense, solid, and utterly resistant to the elements. Set stood upon its deck, his body bristling with anticipation and scorn. Then Isis arrived. She stood by her creation. It was a joke. It was tiny. It was ugly. It was still made of unbaked gray river mud, seemingly drying in the sun. Set threw back his head and roared, a sound that cracked the very air. "Behold, great council," he mocked, pointing a red-taloned finger at the mudboat. "The queen of magic produces a puddle. Is this your challenge, little mother? Are you so reduced that you offer a child's bath toy to compete against a vessel of the living earth? I shall not even need to touch it. The ripple from my wake will dissolve your pathetic little mud clump." The other gods were too polite to laugh outright, but the skepticism was palpable. Even Thoth had to suppress the clicking of his beak. Only Isis remained silent, impassive. She knelt beside the mud coracle. She dipped her hand into the Nile, the great river, the source of all life in Kemet. She did not speak a command, or wave a wand, or summon a spirit. Instead, in the silence of her heart, she focused all the terrible, mind-bending power of the unspoken name of Ra. She did not carve it onto the hull. That would be too coarse. Instead, she remade the mud, atom by atom, so that the substance itself became the name. The seemingly fragile walls of the boat were not held together by the properties of clay and water, but by the primeval magic of the sun god's essence, the word that brought the world into being, and the word that could unmake it. To the eye, it was still a mud boat, but to the cosmos, it was a vessel made of pure, reality-bending truth. It weighed nothing, and was more durable than a mountain. As the sunlight struck it, the gray mud began to subtly shimmer with a faint, impossible gold that only Horus, stepping carefully aboard, truly saw. He looked at his mother, his falcon eyes widening in sudden, terrifying understanding. The game had changed. Set was doomed. The start of the race and the law of being. The signal for the race was given by Shu, the air god. He unleashed a sudden, powerful gust of wind, a sound like a vast, indrawn breath. Set's magnificent black granite ship moved immediately, a mountain suddenly gaining momentum, its prow cutting through the water with terrifying, earth-shaking force. It left a towering, chaotic wake behind it, churning the Nile into a violent, muddy froth. Set, standing proud and defiant, let out another great, booming laugh of pure exhilaration. "Look at the dust I leave you, nephew. We race to the throne on the backs of power and might, not on nursery rhymes and dried earth." The mudboat of Horus, by contrast, seemed to do nothing. It sat briefly, utterly still, on the surface. Set's wake surged toward it, a wall of water that should have instantly dissolved the fragile clay. But as the wave hit, an impossible thing happened. The water did not dissolve the mud. It sheared around it, as if the vessel were a hole in reality, a point of pure stillness the water could not touch. Horus grasped the tiller, made not of wood, but of a hardened reed. He spoke no spells, offered no incantations. He simply thought of Ma'at, of balance and rightful order, and the vessel, made of the true name of Ra, responded. The true name is the law of being. It dictated that the boat existed, and its existence was absolute. It did not need to resist the wave. The wave was compelled to respect its existence. With a motion so fluid it was barely visible, The tiny mud boat began to move. It did not use sails or oars in the traditional sense. It slipped across the water. It was not propelled by physical force, but by the raw, conceptual power of creation. It moved as swiftly as a thought, lighter than a feather, gliding across the churning Nile as if sailing on glass. Set's vessel was powerful, yes, but it was bound by the physical laws of the world he governed: gravity, friction, and mass. Every thrust of its mighty oars required the expenditure of immense energy. Horus's vessel required only existence. It was pure form following function, unbound by matter. Within moments, the impossible occurred. The insignificant, mocked mud boat, carrying the weight of the rightful heir, began to close the distance. It moved with a silent, unstoppable speed that defied geometry. Set glanced over his shoulder, expecting to see a sinking scrap of clay. Instead, he saw the tiny vessel gaining on his massive black monolith. The desert god's mocking smile evaporated, replaced by a flicker of disbelief, and then a terrifying, cold fury. He summoned a localized storm, whipping the air into a frenzy. Sharp, hard spears of wind and sand lashed out from his deck, intended to rip the sail or smash the hull. The storm struck Horus's boat. The tempestuous winds of Set, which could flatten whole villages and peel the skin from mountains, bent around the surface of the mud. Because the hull was fundamentally composed of the true name of Ra, it represented the primordial order. Chaos could not touch order. Set's storm, the very essence of his Fet, was unable to violate the absolute reality held within the structure of the boat. The magic was perfect, silent, and devastatingly humiliating. Horus sailed on, completely unimpeded, moving past the roaring, frustrated Set like a breath of wind past a boulder. Set's humiliation and the revelation of the name. The sight of the mud boat pulling ahead of the magnificent granite vessel caused a divine gasp among the assembled Ennead. Thoth's beak dropped open in astonished silence. Shu stopped breathing. Set, in his granite behemoth, was now struggling, his muscles straining against the immense drag of the heavy stone, while the coracle of Horus skimmed the water like a water strider. The sheer audacity of the humiliation was a palpable force. Set was used to winning through sheer, overwhelming force. He was the thunder, the brute strength of the cosmos. To be beaten by a tiny, fragile, ugly thing was an insult that transcended mere defeat. It was a cosmic mockery. "Impossible! A trick of illusion!" Set shrieked, his voice vibrating with frantic rage. He abandoned the tiller, leaped onto the prow of his granite ship, and began to channel raw, destructive magic into his hands. He intended to blast the miserable little boat with a bolt of pure, desert fire energy. He summoned the terrible heat of the midday sun and compressed it into a sphere of crackling, red energy. As he was about to launch the attack, a sudden, cold terror seized him. He looked not at the mud, but at the light emanating from it. The gentle, faint gold that shimmered on the surface was not the glow of reflected sunlight. It was the glow of primordial truth. Set, as the cosmic defender of Ra's bark and the master of raw power, was intimately familiar with the properties of creation and destruction. He understood the hierarchy of magic. No lesser magic could withstand his divine blast. Only one power held ultimate dominion: the true name of Ra. He froze, the fireball dissipating uselessly in his hands, leaving only smoke. His rage turned instantly into an icy, sinking dread. He understood the plot. He understood the depth of Isis's cunning. She had not built a boat. She had given form to the word of creation. "You foul witch!" Set roared, pointing toward Isis, who stood calmly on the shore, watching the scene unfold with an expression of cold satisfaction. "You used his name, the unspoken name. You betrayed the secrets of the Aten itself to build that filth." He did not dare attack the boat. To strike the true name of Ra, the foundational principle of existence, would be to risk his own immediate unmaking. He was the god of Isfet, chaos, but the vessel was the embodiment of Ma'at, order. The moment his power touched the boat, the law of reality would assert itself, and Set, the betrayer, the murderer, the force of disorder, would be erased. He was trapped by his own arrogance. He had mocked the boat because of its physical appearance, failing to realize that its reality was based on conceptual magic, not material substance. He had focused on the form and missed the essence. The tiny mud boat, carrying the serene Horus, rounded the Isle of the Two Truths and began its final approach toward the finish line on the eastern bank of the Nile. It surged forward with a final, effortless burst of speed, leaving Set's mighty, immobile granite vessel floundering in its conceptual dust. The mudboat touched the shore, and instantly, as its purpose was fulfilled, the spell of the true name lifted. The perfect, reality-bending structure dissolved, not into simple mud, but into a handful of dust in a puddle of clear, clean Nile water. Horus stepped onto the sand, victorious, his face radiating quiet, undeniable triumph. Set, utterly defeated and paralyzed by the terror of Isis's power, could only stare across the water, his humiliation complete, his claim to the throne fractured by a few ounces of magic-imbued Nile clay. The judgment of Ra. The victory was undeniable, complete, and witnessed by the entire Ennead. Thoth, regaining his composure, swiftly recorded the events, his tablet smoking slightly from the intensity of the magic he had just documented. The score now stood irrevocably against Set. The god of storms was forced to sail his cumbersome, defeated granite ship back to the shore, his face a mask of impotent fury. The moment his vessel touched land, the stone seemed to sag under the weight of his cosmic failure. Isis stepped forward, her regal form once again restored, her cloak shimmering with the authority of the throne itself. She addressed the great council, her voice carrying the cold clarity of a mother who has endured 80 years of injustice. "Great council, what further proof is needed?" she demanded. "My son, Horus, represents Mayat, the eternal balance. He faced the brute force of Isfet, the chaos of Set, with cunning, knowledge, and the ultimate foundational power that holds the cosmos together. Set scoffed at the humility of the vessel, focusing only on the exterior, proving his mind is set on superficial power, not the deep, subtle order required to rule Kemet. Set roared, his voice thick with frustration. "You cheated! You abused the ultimate secret! I challenged the ruling! The name of Ra was meant only for the maintenance of the cosmos, not for petty boat races." Thoth interrupted, raising a silencing hand. "The rules of the Contendings permit the use of any divine power at the disposal of the contestants. You, Set, chose to use the strength of the earth. Isis chose to use the strength of creation. No rule was broken, only exploited with superior intellect. The vessel was a testament not to the strength of Horus, but to the Ma'at inherent in his cause." The gods turned their faces toward the sun. Though Ra had delegated the decision, the consensus of the Ennead was needed, and their minds were now swayed. The humiliating defeat of the granite ship by the mudboat was a visible, tangible lesson. Brute force cannot defeat foundational truth. A great stillness fell upon the banks of the Nile. The air grew still, the water flat. Then a voice, a sound not heard but felt, echoed in the minds of every being, divine and mortal, from the Duat to the highest heaven. It was the voice of Re himself speaking from the infinite distance of the solar bark. "The judgment is clear. Set's claim is based on the murder of Osiris, a crime against Ma'at. His continued insistence on physical might over wisdom and justice proves him unfit for the throne. The demonstration of Isis, using the most potent force in existence to validate her son's claim, is accepted. The throne of Egypt belongs to the son of Osiris." The solar disk seemed to intensify, bathing Horus in a warm, undeniable golden light. The light of supreme validation. Set, finally broken, sank to his knees on the deck of his black ship. He was not erased. His service to Ra against Apep guaranteed his existence, but his ambition for the throne was violently, cosmically crushed. The desert god, the mighty warrior, was defeated not by a sword, but by a mother's devastating silent love and the power of a word he never even knew existed within the vessel he had so carelessly mocked. The contendings were over. Horus, the falcon god, the rightful king, had finally prevailed.